Well, welcome to 10-Minute Record Reviews, episode 272. And this is a bit of a strange episode because I'm about to go on my semi-annual research break because in addition to this already apparently full-time job, I have an actual full-time job. I'm a consultant, and despite my best efforts and predictions, the firm's actually doing okay. So occasionally I've got to take a bit of a break and actually tend to business and buy myself a bit of time to get ready for a string of reviews to come. So I'll be coming back on April 22nd with a fresh review. But what's going to happen in that 2-week period includes the second official anniversary of the channel, which I created on April 21st, 2020, although the first video wasn't until May 1st of that year. So I'm feeling a bit reflective. I'd like to take stock. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about my collection and my philosophy of gathering and getting rid of records, tell you a bit about what's in there. I'll show you a bit of a sneak peek of my rig, and of course, as I mentioned, I'd like to ask you some questions. So what was to become this channel actually started on Facebook as a project right at the beginning of the pandemic in March 2020, right in the midst of the onset of all that, oh my God, we're going to die panic. A friend of mine was putting Spotify playlists on Facebook. I did a few of those, and I thought, you know what, I've got all these records. Why didn't I see if anybody that I know wants me to do a review, a video on any particular record? And a bunch of people were foolish enough to say yes. So I did about 20 videos about individual records on Facebook, and they were, without exception, absolutely awful. There was no script. There were tons of ums and ahs. There was precious little research. I made all kinds of mistakes. I also had Facebook on my case routinely because I was using little clips of the music, not very long, but just enough to piss off their copyright people. Anyway, as I say, I did about 20 of those, and I realized that was a bit much to inflict on my family and friends, so it was time to take this to YouTube. So in April 2020, I created this, once again at the height of that initial COVID panic. We're all going to die, so let's talk about what's really important, which is, of course, vinyl records. I did this partly as a way of connecting, because as we can all recall, that was a pretty lonely time. But also, over the years, I've been gathering this ridiculous mass of records, and in even more recent years, I'd had enough disposable cash to start increasing the rate at which I was acquiring, and it became apparent to me that I may not actually get around to listening to all these, but I really wanted to. So I thought to myself, what's a way to actually force myself to listen to all these things and engage with the music properly? And I thought, I know, my grandpa used to write notes on books that he had. He was a big book collector. I'll do the same, only a video format for my records. So the plan was, let's review them, and let's review them all. So as I mentioned, when I first started doing this on Facebook, those videos were awful. The first videos I did on YouTube, which are still on this channel, are, I think, still pretty awful. I was doing one a day, which I now recognize was completely insane. Again, I didn't have much of a script, made all kinds of mistakes, just kind of free associated, not always to good effect. And of course, the principal mistake that I made was thinking that the reason people were tuning in was actually to hear about what I thought about the record, which is actually not the case. I mean, some of you apparently care what I think and actually really value those discussions. Lots of viewers have become regular contributors in the chat, and I actually really value those connections. But music reviews per se weren't really what I had to offer. I'm no Robert Christgau, I'm no Quincy Jones, but what I can do is research. I wasted most of my youth at grad school, and I do think I have an ability, if I say so myself, to put historical context around pieces of art or moments in time. So if you're a regular viewer, you'll notice that the historical and contextual pieces are getting longer and longer than they used to be, and the review part is getting shorter and sweeter. The jazz videos tend to get most views, and they're going to keep coming in volume, but I'm committed to mixing it up. And while I have been doing more special episodes and collaborative things lately, I'm committed to the single album history and review. That's always going to be the core part of this channel. So, my collection, I'm going to go through it in the order I have it shelved, and if you want the full list, it's all on Discogs, and I put the link in the description below. I have in total about 1,700 records, and there's a reason for that. Well, I guess a couple reasons. First of all, that's what these shelves will hold. I'll show you the lower part later on. That's about exactly the physical amount of records I can get in there without squishing things. But also, I think that that's about as many records as any one human being could conceivably listen to over the course of 10 years and actually really pay attention to and listen to the music. And so in recent years, as the stuff I've really been digging for that I really want comes in, the dross, the low-hanging fruit of the bottom end, goes out. I'm pretty close to a state where it's all killer, no filler. As a consequence, there are very few compilations left, very album focused, and I've also been really focusing on getting good early pressings and not so much later reissues, particularly no gray market reissues. I do have a handful of singles and a smaller number of 10-inch records largely from the 40s and early 50s, and I have a bunch of evil silver discs left over from a prior life. So let's start with Latin, and this is the Latin section. I have these funky, somewhat self-indulgent thingies that I got from a guy in Estonia or Latvia, I think, actually, and they're a hell of a deal. You can get them online. So the Latin collection, mostly classic Latin records. It all came really in the last 3 or 4 years because I am a big fan of the record Buena Vista Social Club, the original release. But I didn't know anything about Latin jazz or Latin music at all. And I knew that I liked that. And so I began to research, well, what is music like this? And that took me to Cuba. It took me to a whole bunch of different styles, like the Cuban conjuntos, these bigger groups, and then some smaller groups as well. Bigger groups like Sonora Matancera, which was basically like the Duke Ellington Orchestra of Cuba. American Latin jazz like Cal Jader. I've got a lot of Boogaloo, which was this really excellent mix-up between R&B and Latin music in the mid to late 1960s. I've got a bunch of stuff on the Fania label, who really created salsa and had this amazing roster of stars in the early 70s. And I got a whole bunch of records by Ray Barretto, the Puerto Rican, New Yorican percussionist. Now we're into the jazz. And this is the biggest single component of my collection. It's more than half of my collection. It starts here, goes there, all the way along here, all the way along here, all the way to there. It has all the categories that I talked about the other day when I did a video about jazz genres in the post-war period. In terms of the groups or artists that are overrepresented, both Coltrane's, Miles Davis, Archie Shepp, Pharoah Sanders. I'm not quite a completist, but I'm pretty close on a lot of those artists. Underrepresented, easily fusion, early bebop, and swing. Great music, but not really my thing. I have, as you can probably see from the orange and black spines, quite a few impulse releases, most of which, if not all, are early or original pressings. I've got all the impulses I think I want, about 100 or so. I also have quite a few blue notes, but I'm not quite as obsessive about gathering those. Now I just had to tilt the camera to show you my Jamaican, that is reggae and ska, not all actually Jamaican, some of which is British as well. This collection, which is everything here and over there. This is largely roots reggae, a lot of original releases. Heavily overrepresented here is Burning Spear, who's one of my absolute favorites. I also have quite a few early Jamaican pressings, which can be kind of hit and miss when you're buying them in terms of quality, but the sound quality just is night and day compared to any or most recent re-releases. Now we're into the Brazilian, largely the Bossa Nova collection, which is basically that section there. Again, anybody who watches this channel knows that I just love Bossa Nova and its US derivatives, at least until things start to get cheesy. Tons of Jobim, tons of Gilberto, lots of Vinicius records, Stan Getz, Herbie Mann, who's an underappreciated contributor to that whole world as well. Also a little bit of MPB. Okay, so from here, all the way along here, and all the way to there, is the classic record store rock, pop, and folk category. I mean, folk's a bit of a problem. Like, where do you put Gordon Lightfoot? Does folk deserve its own category? No, it doesn't. In terms of the content, well, this collection will not surprise anybody who listens to classic rock radio, although my tastes tend to the British Commonwealth more than the US, so I have no Bob Seger, I have no Springsteen, I have no Mellencamp, that's all by choice, but I do have pretty completist collections of Zeppelin, Purple, Sabbath, Rod Stewart and the Faces, Kinks, Beatles and the Stones. Now what we have here is soul and hip-hop. I love hip-hop, but I don't collect a lot of it. This is mostly soul and R&B, mostly the classic era, Aretha, Stevie Wonder, Marvin Gaye, Kool and the Gang, and a healthy dose of disco and funk. And then way down here at the back are about 30 country records, but I can tell you those are some of the greatest country records that were ever made. A little chat about my rig, which is comprised of a pretty much entry-level Rega P1 turntable with a stock cartridge, and Harman Kardon HK450, which is like a 1978 era integrated amp. I have an evil silver disc player, and you'll notice that my turntable is mounted on these sushi soy sauce cups with rubber bands because I was stupid enough to make this platform out of plywood, and the whole damn thing vibrates as soon as the bass goes up. So that's the basics. To complete the rig, I've got a pair of middling B&W 684 towers, which are nothing to write home about, and to compensate for their inadequacies, middling subwoofer, which is even less to write home about. And I clean all my records with a spin clean, and I'm not convinced it's really worth spending much more money than this. So that's my little pre-break tour. Before I go, as I mentioned, I have 3 questions that I wanted to ask of viewers, and I would love it, as I said, if you would put answers in the chat. First of all, I'd love to know what I'm doing that people really like. So if you could let me know in the comments, what is it that you like about the channel and the reviews, and what of that would you like to see even more of? Secondly, perhaps obviously, I'd like to know how I could be doing better. What would you like to see changed or different about the channel? And finally, as you know, recently I've been mixing things up. Yes, doing the histories and reviews, but also doing some collaborative work with other YouTubers and also doing some special episodes. Are there any special themes or special topics which you would like me to focus on in a special episode or in a collaboration with somebody else in the future? If so, please do let me know. So there you have it. I'll be reading your comments in the chat below. I'm very appreciative for anything people put there. I'll read all of it. Thanks for watching this little tour. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Even after 200 and some videos and 2 years, it still makes my day when I get a little notification that someone subscribed. And thank you, and we'll see you on April 22nd.